Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The moon hung low over the city of Eldoria, casting long shadows across its cobblestone street. A heavy fog clung to the alleys like a second skin, muffling the footsteps of those who walked the midnight path. To most, the city was asleep, its people tucked safely away in their bed. But not everyone found solace in the night. Beneath the veil of darkness, power shifted hands, whispers carried weight, and death moved unseen. Kyle crouched on the rooftop of a dilapidated building, his breath steady despite the chill in the air. His dark cloak blended with the night, making him invisible to all but the most trained eye. He was no ordinary citizen of Eldoria. He was a blade in the dark, one of the elite assassins of the Blade of the Night. The guild had given him many missions over the years, from silencing loudmouthed nobles to ending the lives of rival guild members. Each target had been just another name, another face that bled and died without question. Kyle never faltered, but this mission, this one felt different. The target wasn't just a rich merchant or a scheming lord. It was the king himself. King Aldrich sat on his throne, the ruler of Eldoria in name, but Kyle had long since learned that thrones held no real power. Power was held by those who knew how to use the shadows, those who whispered in the dark. Still, the order had come from Lady Celine herself, the enigmatic leader of the Blade of the Night. And when she gave an order, it was followed without question. Or at least it had been that way until now. Kyle's mind raced as he tightened his grip on the hilt of his dagger, the blade gleaming faintly in the moonlight. He had slipped into the castle with ease, moving past the guards as though they were nothing more than statues. His training had honed him into the perfect predator, and tonight was meant to be his greatest kill. Yet as he watched the king from the shadows, a conversation floated to his ears, carried by the silence of the night. "It's not enough," Aldrich, a voice whispered, low and urgent. Kyle's eyes narrowed, focusing on the source of the voice, a man clad in the robes of a royal advisor, standing close to the throne. "The Council of Shadows demands more than just your word." King Aldrich's face, illuminated by the soft glow of the chamber's sage torches, was pale and drawn. "I've given them everything. The people already suffer under the weight of these taxes. If I take more, they will rise against me." The advisor lip-curled in disdain. "The council controls the people, not you. They may see you as their king, but we both know who truly rules the city. Fail to deliver, and you need to worry about the people because you'll be dead." Kyle's heart pounded in his chest. The Council of Shadows. The name was a whispered secret among the elite, a shadowy group that pulled the strings behind Eldoria. Rumors of their influence had reached even the darkest corners of the Blade of the Night, but their true identity remained a mystery. Was this what Celine had sent him to kill for? To eliminate a puppet who danced on strings of the council's sad design? He'd never cared much for politics, but this was something bigger. He had been sent to kill a king, but now it seemed the king was nothing more than a pawn. The tension in the chamber grew thick as the advisor's sand voice sharpened. "Deliver the council's demands, or they will find someone who will. You then been warned, Aldrich." Kyle watched the exchange, his thoughts swirling. The advisor turned to leave, his expression cold and calculating, but the king remained on his throne, staring into the fire as though it held all the answers to his crumbling kingdom. Kyle's instincts told him to strike, to complete the mission as he had always done. But for the first time, hesitation gripped him. If he killed Aldrich, the council would merely replace him with another puppet, one who would bend more easily to their will. The guild had never questioned the morality of their contracts, but Kyle could no longer ignore the nagging voice in the back of his mind. He slid silently down from the rafters, landing with the grace of a shadow. His dagger gleamed as he approached the king, the faintest whisper of steel against air. Aldrich didn't notice, his mind elsewhere, locked in the torments of his precarious reign. Kyle stood behind him, his hand tightening on the hilt, poised to strike. Yet, as the blade hovered near the king's throat, a sudden flood of thoughts crashed over him. This wasn't right? Aldrich wasn't the true enemy. The real threat lay deeper in the very structure that had corrupted the kingdom from the inside out. Killing the king wouldn't change that. Aldrich's voice broke, the silence soft and weary. "If you're really going to kill me, assassin, do it quickly." Kyle's eyes widened. How had he known? The king remained motionless, but his next words were laced with resignation. "I've heard of your kind. The Blade of the Night, thee come for my life, haven't told you." Kyle stepped back, lowering his blade. "You were supposed to die tonight," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "But there's more to this than I was told." Aldrich turned slowly, his tired eyes locking with Kyle's side. "Then perhaps we have more in common than you think. I am not the true ruler of this kingdom. Assassin, the Council of Shadows." Kyle sheathed his dagger, his mind racing. He had never questioned his orders before. The guild had taken him in as a child, trained him, given him purpose. But now he stood on the precipice of something greater, a truth that could shatter everything he thought he knew. "The council wants you dead," Kyle said, his voice low, "and my guild was hired to make it happen." Aldrich's gaze hardened. "Then you know why I've fought them. They control everything, the people, the nobles, the guilds. My death will only strengthen their grip on this city." Kyle's jaw tightened. "Why should I believe you?" The king stood, his posture rigid, but his voice steady. "Because if you kill me, you'll all be doing their work for them. The council will replace me with another puppet, and the cycle will continue. But if you help me, we can expose them. We can end their control." Kyle's mind churned with conflicting thoughts. He had always believed in the Blade of the Night, trusted ladies Celine and the guild's upcreed, but now it all seemed like a lie. "I need time," Kyle muttered, backing away toward the shadow. Aldrich watched him with cautious eyes. "Time is a luxury we do not have. Assassin, choose your side carefully." Without another word, Kyle slipped back into the darkness, his cloak billowing behind him as he disappeared into the night. The streets of Eldoria were silent as Kyle made his way back to the guild, side out. His mind was a storm of conflicting emotions, loyalty, doubt, and something he hadn't felt in a long time, fear. Lady Celine awaited him in the grand hall of the Blade of the Night, her figure cloaked in shadows as always. Her pale eyes glinted beneath her hood as she turned to face him. "Is it done?" she asked, her voice smooth and commanding. Kyle hesitated for the briefest of moments, then nodded. "The king lived." Celine's eyes narrowed. "You failed the mission." "I didn't fail," Kyle replied, his tone sharp. "I chose not to kill him." The silence in the hall was palpable, a tension that gripped the very air between them. Celine took a step closer, her gaze piercing. "You defied a direct order from the guild." "I learned something bigger than the king," Kyle said, his voice steady despite the storm inside him. "The Council of Shadows, they were the ones pulling the strings. Killing Aldrich would only play into their hand." Celine's expression remained unreadable, her pale features betraying nothing. "The council's influence is no secret, Kyle, but the guild doesn't concern itself with the politics of the kingdom. We are blades, not pawns." "But we were being used," Kyle countered, his voice rising. "We were doing their dirty work, and they will just replace Aldrich with someone else. Nothing will change." Celine stepped closer, her voice dropping to a cold whisper. "And what would you have us do, Kyle? We are assassins. We take lives. We don't play at being heroes." Kyle met her gaze unflinching. "I am not asking to be a hero. I am asking why we were helping them keep control there, so that rebellion brewing. The people are ready to rise up to fight against the council. If we align ourselves with them, we could change everything." For the first time, Celine's eyes flickered with something annoyance, perhaps, or anger. "You read a fool if you think you can change the system, Kyle. The council's grip on Eldoria is unbreakable. And if you side with the rebellion, you will be dead before you can make a difference." Kyle clenched his fists, frustration boiling in his chest. "Then I'll die fighting for something that matters." Celine's lips curved into a cold smile. "If you choose that path, Kyle, you will no longer be one of us. You will be hunted as a traitor." Kyle stepped back, his mind reeling. The guild had been his family, his life. But now, faced with the truth, he couldn't turn a blind eye. "So be it," he said quietly, turning away from her. As he walked out of the guild's sieve hall, Kyle knew there was no turning back. Kyle moved through the streets of Eldoria, his heart pounding with a mix of anger and clarity. The fog clung thicker now, the air cold and damp against his skin as he passed unseen through alleyways and rooftops, avoiding the usual patrol. He had turned his back on everything he'd known. The Blade of the Night had been his purpose, his home. But now all of that seemed like a distant dream, shattered by the truth he could no longer ignore. He had no plan, no allies save for the thin thread of a rebellion he'd only heard whispers of. If it even existed, he had to find it, and quickly before the guild realized he was no longer one of them. His hand rested on the hilt of his dagger out of habit, though he knew stealth and cunning would serve him better than any weapon in what was to come. The memory of King Aldrich's words still lingered in his mind. There was no time to waste. Kyle could feel the weight of a decision he couldn't walk away from. The rebellion was real, and if he didn't act now, if he didn't try to shift the balance, the city would crumble under the weight of the Council of Shadows. As the first light of dawn bled into the sky, he found himself standing at the edge of the city slum. If anyone knew about the rebellion, it would be here among the people who had the most to gain from toppling the council's grip. He slipped into the shadows of a nearby building, pulling his hood low as he made his way into the winding street. It didn't take long before he found the tavern he had been searching for. The Black Crescent, a known haunt for those who operated on the fringes of society, mercenaries, smugglers, and if the rumors were to be believed, members of the rebellion. Kyle pushed open the heavy wooden door, the smell of smoke and stale ale hitting him as he stepped inside. His eyes quickly adjusted to the dim light, scanning the room for anyone who might give away more than they intended. The tavern's patrons barely glanced at him, too occupied with their own conversations to care about another cloaked figure. Kyle made his way to the bar, where a burly man with a thick, unkempt beard was wiping down the counter. He caught the man's eye. "What shall it be?" the bartender grunted. "Information," Kyle said, keeping his voice low. The man's brow furrowed, his eyes narrowing in suspicion. "We don't serve that here." Kyle leaned in, sliding a small pouch of coins across the counter. "I hear there's talk of rebellion." The bartender's hand froze for a moment before he slowly pocketed the pouch. "You were walking a dangerous path, stranger." "I've already walked it," Kyle replied, his gaze steady. "Now I am looking for people who want to finish what Seth been started." The man hesitated, then jerked his head toward a table in the back corner, talked to the woman in green. "But D'Entrée made me regret that." Kyle nodded, turning his attention to the table in question. A woman sat alone, her long dark hair falling over her shoulders, dressed in a simple green tunic and cloak. She sipped from a cup, her eyes scanning the room with a sharpness that reminded him of Lady Celine. She was no ordinary tavern go. He approached her table, keeping his movements casual. As he neared, her gaze snapped him, and for a brief moment, he saw the glint of a blade beneath her cloak. She was ready for a fight if one came her way. "You looking for something?" she said before he could speak. "I am," Kyle replied, taking a seat across from her. "I hear you might know about a group that sat tired of the council's rule." The woman's eyes narrowed slightly. "And who are you?" "Someone who wants to see the council fall," he said, his voice steady. "They've controlled the city for too long." She studied him in silence for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "You speak as if you know more than most." Kyle held her gaze. "I used to serve the blade of the night." The tension in the room seemed to thicken, the words hanging in the air like a dangerous secret. The woman did move, but her grip on her cup tightened. "You walk a thin line, assassin." "You expect me to believe you? They've turned your back on the guild." "I didn't just turn my back," Kyle said. "I burned the bridge behind me. The guild is in league with the council. They want the king dead to tighten their control. I want to stop that from happening." She leaned back slightly, considering his words. "You must be mad to come here and admit that the guild will hunt you down." "I am counting on it," Kyle said, "but I need help. There's a rebellion brewing, and I can make a difference. I have skills, knowledge. Let me help." The woman remained silent for a moment longer before finally nodding. "I am Elora," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "And if what you say is true, we could use someone like you. But trust isn't given easily." "I am not asking for trust," Kyle said, "just a chance." Allure stood tossing a few coins on the table before gesturing for Kyle to follow her. "We don't have much time. If you are serious, you'll need to prove it." Kyle followed her out of the tavern and into the winding alleys beyond. The city was waking up around them, the morning light casting long shadows as they weaved through the street. Elora led him to a nondescript building, slipping inside without a word. The room they entered was small but filled with people. Men and women, all armed, stood around a large table covered in maps and documents. They looked up as Allura entered, their eyes wary as they spotted Kyle at her side. "This is him," Allura said, addressing the group, "the assassin from the Blade of the Night." Murmurs rippled through the room, and several of the rebels reached for their weapons. Kyle could feel their suspicion, their fear. It didn't matter. He wasn't here to make friends. He was here to end the council's grip on Eldora. "Let him speak," Elvira said, silencing the room. Kyle stepped forward, his voice steady as he addressed the group. I know what the council is planning. They want to kill the king and replace him with someone they control completely. The guild is involved, but they are not the real threat. The council says influence runs deeper than you think. One of the men, a grizzled veteran with a scar running down his cheek, stepped forward. And why should we believe you? Kyle met his gaze without flinching because I had the king's life in my hands last night and I let him live. I could have finished the job and walked away, but I didn't. I am here because I want to fight against the people who are truly pulling the string. The room fell silent. Again, the weight of his words sinking in. Finally, the man nodded. If what you say is true, we're going to need every weapon we can get. The council's forces are stronger than ever and we're running out of time. Elara stepped forward. We've been planning an attack on the council for weeks, but we need someone who can get close to their inner circle. Someone who knows their weaknesses. Kyle nodded. I can do that. I know the guild set operations inside and out. If we move quickly, we can take them down from the inside. The group exchanged glances, the tension in the room thick with anticipation. Finally, Elara turned to Kyle, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and caution. Then let us get to work. Over the next few days, Kyle worked with the rebellion, sharing what he knew about the guild's tactics and the council's set plan. He trained alongside them, teaching them the skills of stealth and combat that had been drilled into him since childhood. Slowly, he began to earn their trust, though he knew that many still regarded him with suspicion. Elara remained at his side, guiding the rebellion with a quiet strength that Kyle had come to admire. She was a natural leader, driven by a fierce desire to see the council fall, but she also had a calm, calculating mind that kept the group focused on their goal. As the days passed, the plan took shape. They would strike at the heart of the council's operations, hitting their stronghold in the center of the city. It was a risky move, but it was the only way to deal a decisive blow to their control. Kyle would lead a small team inside, using his knowledge of the guild to bypass the defenses, while Elara and the rest of the rebels would attack from the outside, creating a distraction to draw the council's forces away. The night of the attack arrived swiftly. Kyle stood in the shadows outside the council's stronghold, his heart pounding as he waited for the signal. Elara stood beside him, her expression grim but determined. We're ready, she said softly, her hand resting on the hilt of her sword. Kyle nodded, his gaze fixed on the looming building ahead. This is it. Without another word, they moved forward, slipping through the streets like shadows. The plan was in motion, and there was no turning back. As they approached the gates of the stronghold, Kyle signaled for the team to stop. He crouched low, studying the guards' movements carefully. The defenses were tight, but not impenetrable. He knew the patterns, the weaknesses. With a swift motion, he led the team forward, disabling the guards with silent precision. They moved quickly, slipping through the gates and into the heart of the stronghold. Inside, the corridors were dimly lit, the flickering torchlight casting long shadows on the stone wall. Kyle's instincts took over as he navigated the labyrinthine halls, his movements silent and sure. The rest of the team followed closely, trusting him to lead them through the dangers that lay ahead. They reached the council's inner chamber without incident, and Kyle signaled for the team to prepare for the final assault. His heart raced as he stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his dagger. The door to the chamber opened with a slow creak, revealing a room filled with opulence and power. The members of the Council of Shadows sat around a large table, their faces hidden beneath dark hoods. Their conversation ceased as they noticed Kyle's presence, their gazes turning toward him with cold, calculating eyes. For a moment, the room was silent, the tension thick in the air. Then, without warning, all hell broke loose.